So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ancestral Ascensions with Trish Meekins. And today we have on the show Emily Kaboni. And I'm going to allow for Emily to introduce herself and what she does. So take it away, Emily.
Yes, thank you so much, Trish, for having me on your second episode on your podcast. I really appreciate it. So I am an Anishinaabekwe artist from Wiikwemkong First Nation up on Manitoulin Island. And I'm an artist of all trades. I try my hand at practically everything, but I think primarily I focus on canvas, painting, acrylic, making dream catchers, a lot of beaded earrings I've been working on, lino prints, so carving out some pretty pictures out of lino.
Right.
So practically everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if anyone's been to All My Relations next door, we have had some art done by Emily there.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that that dream catcher in the background there is something that you have made.
Yes, it's ginormous. It's as
Yeah.
tall as I am. It's about 5 feet. And I
Wow.
actually made this in Sweden probably like 8 years ago.
Wow, it's
So
beautiful.
yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. So when did you decide to begin doing art and kind of what brought you to it?
Um, I believe it's always been a natural talent of mine. So I
Mhm.
just remember just always having that natural talent. I know I was drawing from a very early age, and my parents really nourished that talent in me and really encouraged it and praised me for it. So I just remember, I think my earliest drawings, I remember drawing horses, and I
Nice.
just naturally have been great at it. I know I won some awards growing up in school. Um, I wish I knew how good I was so that I really put effort in towards it because I was very nonchalant, like, yeah, I can draw, but like, who can't?
Hmm.
And so I think I would have excelled quite like if I was more focused with it
Hmm.
in my elementary years. But yeah, I think as I've gotten older, I've started to appreciate that gift and have really been working my feelings into it. Because before I did it for the sake of doing it, but now I'm really connecting with my culture and my mental health with it and my spiritual identity with it as well. So
Hmm.
yeah.
So when did it make that shift? When do you feel that that shift happened where it went from, oh, just doing art because I can do it to
Yeah.
I'm going to start using it to help my own mental health and connect to who I am spiritually?
Yeah, exactly. I think definitely happened when I was living over in Sweden. So I spent the last 10 years of my life over in Europe.
Mhm.
Um, and I started to really focus, like I would say 2018-ish, maybe 2017. I started making like body positive paper cut illustrations. So I would just cut out limbs, and then just glue it all together into like a complete composition. Um, And I think I was really focused just on like modesty in the female body and just kind of like how nuanced people's perception of nudity is.
Mhm.
And I think it just started with that. And I started to lean more in towards my identity with making dream catchers. Um,
Do you have any of the
yeah.
body positive art there
I
with you?
I do. I can grab
Okay.
it. I actually put it up on the wall here. So I think this is like one of my first ones here.
Awesome.
So she has some mucklucks on her, and she has a feather in her hair.
Mhm.
And so I have like 30 of these girls, and they're all just paper cut illustrations. And I really think she's me. I think I've honestly been just creating myself in them with
Mhm.
like the big rosy cheeks and like the long dark hair. So I think that's where it began. And yeah, and become more meditative with it and trying my best to be focused with it. My focus is not very good
And
with.
so when you think of that body positive, what kind of brought you to that idea of being body positive? Was there an influence in Sweden that allowed you to sort of come to that
For
realization?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So
Mhm.
Sweden is quite liberal,
Mhm.
and nudity is not faux pas. It's not scandalous. It's not taboo.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciated that kind of like perspective because I feel like maybe where I grew up in Canada, and there's a bit of influence, of course, like with religion and the Western society and how we sexualize everything and objectify everything, and especially the female body. And I just noticed that there's a different respect to the female body in Sweden.
Hmm.
And that I felt like I needed to heal as well,
Mhm.
because especially growing up as a female, and I developed quite early when I was younger, and I my first memory of shame is from like growing breasts.
Wow.
And that's so unfortunate and I was still a child. So
Hmm.
I think for me to experience a different culture where there is such respect to the female body, that it's not a sexual object, that it is sacred, it is divine, it's human and it's natural, I think that's where it started. I'm like, oh, okay, so I can make nude art and it's not scandalous. It's beautiful.
Hmm. And so was there, what's an example maybe? Was it the art that actually got you to think about that, or was there something that happened that you saw, or just kind of over time you saw how, like, what was it exactly that showed you that?
I think it was definitely over time. I remember in high school, I had my art teacher. I had free reign in art school, so I didn't actually follow the curriculum. I could make whatever I wanted to.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make artwork with pinup girls. And I know there's a connotation with that, that is a sexualized image of a female.
Yeah.
However, I always saw the beauty first. I always saw like she's empowered by her beauty and by her body. And he had made a negative comment toward it, and I never had felt that before.
Hmm.
So I think with that, and like let's fast forward like 8 years, I was like, I want to make kind of not necessarily pinup style, but I want empowered artwork of a female body. And I can make that happen. I can make that sacred and I can make that natural.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So, what was your perception in terms of being a First Nations woman in Canada? I find that population, of course, um, our population has been the most targeted.
Yeah.
And there has been a legislative policy on our women for as soon as the settlers came here to Turtle
Mhm.
Island. Being that, and just to share a little bit of history around that, is that our we view our women as the life givers and the caretakers of the communities. And so the whole system was based on that nurturing side of the woman who empowered all of the other people in the community, leadership, men, young women, young men, young boys. Um, and so I feel like there has been a target on our women, especially when we look at, the 1869 legislation, where if you were a First Nations woman who married a non-Indigenous man or a non-First
Mhm.
Nations man, you lost your status, and all of
Yeah.
the children lost their status as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like there has been a target on our women. Were you aware of those kinds of things, or were you brought up with that kind of shame, or
Not necessarily with that,
Mhm,
because my father is unfortunately a child from the 60s scoop.
mhm,
And my mother was adopted at a very young age, and her grandparents are Indigenous.
mhm,
And unfortunately, when you are separated from your culture, you don't know the culture, you don't know the history, you don't know what's happening currently. They weren't as educated, so they weren't able to share that with me.
mhm.
However, I did feel growing up, and I could actually pinpoint moments now as an adult that there was a lot of microaggressions towards us.
Absolutely.
Um, and like that's you can't make sense of that as a kid. You don't
Yeah,
that doesn't make sense to you.
yeah.
So I've definitely felt those microaggressions, and I noticed a lot because my dad obviously he's fully Indigenous and he
Mhm,
looks fully Indigenous.
mhm.
And I just noticed like he had a lot of unfair treatment
Yeah,
cast on him, and
yeah,
that never made sense to me at
that's
all.
right. Yeah, yeah,
But
that's
then
actually.
I grew up, and then I when I went over in Sweden, and I started, kind of just dismantling a lot of the things that I've learned and digging into my new culture. I learned so much, and it's just insane that we weren't taught this, and we weren't even taught this in school at
Yes.
all. So it's yeah, a
Yeah,
big
well, good
learning
for
thing.
you. What brought you to Sweden?
I met a Swedish guy on the internet when I was 16,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had a long distance relationship for about 2 years.
Hmm.
And then I moved to Sweden when I was 19.
Wow.
Yes. And then we
Wow.
got married and I brought him back here. So it's a nice full circle moment.
Yes, awesome. That's really awesome.
Hmm.
So I guess we've kind of maybe talked about what that catalyst to change was, that over time living in Sweden that you began to realize that, you don't need to be ashamed. And
Yeah.
it's really nice to hear that you had such that kind of experience at such a young age so that you weren't carrying any of this shame or like trying to figure out what were those microaggressions, that were happening to you and your family as you were growing up here. That was definitely, those microaggressions was one of my reasons for actually pursuing what was the issue going on here in Canada? Why were there so many First Nations, or why was there so much anger towards the First Nations
Yep.
people? I could not
Disdain.
understand that.
Yeah.
Right. And so over time, as I teach the history, I've taught the history over many years now, and understanding that, because of that treaty relationship and, wanting that, ownership of our land, of our ancestral lands, that is where that anger is coming from. So it took me a long time to really understand that, but I was like, what is going on? Because as you say, as a child, you have no idea what's
Nope.
going on. Like, why are people responding in this way?
Yep. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. So, like, is there anything, do you have any other art there that you would like to show us?
Oh, unfortunately, I don't. Not in this room.
Hmm.
It's just my dream catcher and my Bopo girl.
Because I was thinking your paintings, of the women too, or of the girls, are quite
Yes.
nice. I know
Yeah.
that when they were here on the shop, they did not last long at all.
No.
And so it's really great to see that, people are seeking out that kind of art, and that you're being very, very successful with it. And
Yeah.
and so I guess one last thing I want to ask you is if there is anything that you would like to share with the people who've joined us today on the podcast, something to help them maybe along with their journey, or maybe even that call to from the ancestors to rise up with who you are.
Yeah. I think one thing that I'm thinking about, and one thing that's been so beneficial for me, is I really encourage people to really acknowledge your inner child and figure out those wounds and those hurts and those pains. And just to begin your healing journey, because the best thing that we can do as First Nations people is to really dig deep and unlearn some of the harmful rhetorics that we've been taught, and to how do we navigate our pain so that ultimately we can start bringing generational wealth instead of repeating those generational curses. So I think that's one thing I really encourage everyone to do, and I do it myself, and I try very, very hard, and I'm very focused on my healing journey, and
Mhm.
it is a day to day situation. I'm not fully healed. I'll never be fully healed, but it's just learning how to navigate those ebbs and flows of pain and trauma, and how I can respond just in a more kind way to myself.
Mhm. Yeah, that loving self-compassion,
Hmm.
gratitude for who you are and where you are,
Yes.
all of those kinds of things. And I
Yeah.
think that is really actually what caught my eye, when you sent over your little bio that we had displayed along with your art, that you wanted to be that intergenerational trauma curse breaker, that this was
Yes.
not going to happen, and
Yeah.
from your generation on type of thing.
Hmm.
And so that really, it's good to hear such a young person say something like that, because I feel like that's kind of been my life mission, um,
Hmm.
as well, even though life takes you all down all different types of pathways for sure.
Certainly.
So yes, it was good to hear that, because we have many, many strengths. And I think
Hmm.
about how our ancestors, think about the next 7 generations into the future, and if we look back at how powerful those ancestors were those many years ago, and it was their intentions and the having gratitude for everything that they did,
Yeah.
offering that tobacco or that sema at, at points in, when they wake up in the morning to honor the sun, when they go out and pick medicines, the offering that
Hmm.
tobacco there, all of those things, living in gratitude. I think that it really is something that's caught on over the years.
Yeah.
But this is not new information, this is
Mhm.
something that all of the people of the earth have had
Yeah.
for since it's come to be, I think.
Hmm.
And it's nice to hear that some of those truths are coming back out again. So that's really, really awesome.
Hmm.
Being a therapist, I heard about that inner child, even way back when I was like, 16, 17 years old, and
Hmm.
began my journey for helping people.
Hmm.
And so I kind of went with that, and then after a while I was like, oh, do we need to even really acknowledge the inner child? But I've kind of come back to, yes, I think we really do need to acknowledge that inner child and go back to those moments in time where you wish that you had someone to come in and protect you,
Exactly.
at those times in your life. So maybe, revisiting those times, and picking up that inner child and letting that inner child know that, you know they are powerless in those situations, and that you're here to protect them. So
Hmm.
really, really great point in terms of looking after that inner child, and
Hmm.
and focusing on the healing, because I think that not only our own people, but all of our relations, as we
Absolutely.
say,
Yeah.
um, that we that we really focus on healing ourselves within, because it's through healing ourselves within that we can begin to heal the others around us.
Exactly.
So what a really great point. Is there anything else you'd like to share with me today, Emily?
I don't think so. I think we did
Oh,
very well. I'm really
yeah.
proud. I was really nervous, and I'm glad I didn't trip over any words. So it's a success.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much
Thank
for coming on
you.
the show, Chimigwech.
Yes.
I just I like to start with a little smudge, and also having the water here behind me, I talked to the ancestors to make sure that they were here with us today.
Yeah.
So Miigwech, for being the first real guest on the show.
Yeah.
The introduction, of course, with Cecilia, but having you on the show has been really, really positive, and I'm sure that it's going to help others find that outlet for
Mm.
themselves to begin maybe their own healing journey or their
Yeah.
ancestral ascensions.
Exactly. I hope so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.